Another week. Hope everyone had a wonderful weekend. Lots going on in the world today. Lot going on in the world today. We are moving ourselves in very quick form into a world of optimism. I know there's still measured optimism. We're not out of the woods anytime soon, but at least there's a sense now that we hope and pray and are looking at things that hopefully are turning around. For those that are in different states, it's starting already. Here in New York, we're like at the center of the storm, so we're I think slower than everybody else, but at least now when you're walking in the streets, you're seeing things that are a little bit different. And as we keep on saying over here, spring is not just a season in terms of weather, it's also a metaphor for life. Spring is the time in which you are supposed to come out of the hibernation of winter. Winter is the moments of introspection. Winters of one's life are the moments where we contemplate, we think. It's the spring when we start to put it into action. Spring is when we are planting, when we are out there in the fields again, when we're exercising the things that we've been working on. And so what we're trying to do here on this show, daily, is really try to identify how we can get a little bit better every day. One of the great mistakes we make in life is that we think that change is really age specific. As one gets older, the changes become less. It's not true. Studies show that entrepreneurs that start companies after the age of 50 have like a 2 or 3 times more likely chance of success than when they were under the age of 30. It's just that in this world, as one gets older, there's this sense that there's some kind of setting into place. The mind sets into place. And there's a sense of truth to that. But there's also a wisdom that takes place. So no matter what age you're listening to this, it's important to recognize that if our eyes are open, we can get better today. What we've been talking about last week is this idea of rituals. Those that are joining us for the first time today, thank you. For those that are coming back, thank you. And the different platforms that this is on every day, on my YouTube channel, on my Facebook, or on Momentum's Facebook, or on my Instagram, you can go back and look at the earlier episodes. So about a week and a half ago, we started talking about this idea of visualization. That if you really want to change your life, you have to see it. You can't just randomly walk through life. You have to see something. You have to go somewhere. You got to put something into your mind's GPS so that it knows what turns to make. How do you know what choice to make in a crossroads in life if you don't have a destination? Should you go north or south? I don't know. Should you do, should you take this or don't take this? Should you wake up early or later? Should you study or, I don't know. It's all relative. It all depends. It depends on where you're going. For so many of us, our lives have just been reacting that we stop going. This happens to me every single day of the week. Every day of the week when I wake up and I look at the amount of emails, thank God that I have, my first thought is I just got to get through my day. And the days that I do that, the days that I just like wake up in the morning and like finish praying and then like learn a little bit and then start my emails. You ever have this? You start your emails. By the time you're done, you're exhausted. And then you get to the end of the day, and all you've been doing is reacting. And if that just becomes life, most of life, it's nice, it's good. God sends us what he needs. There's a certain sense of life of where our purpose is being given to us. There's no question. So it's not wasteful. But if you go through life and all we're really doing is getting better at reacting, we're kind of missing an important element to this, which is, where do I want to be going? What do I want to be contributing? Am I in the right trajectory of the goal? Which is why we have to think before we act, which is why we have to visualize. Now remember, visualization is just taking us to some general direction. The real work is in our daily rituals. The real work is in our reconstituting our minds. And as we do something, as we think something, our brain starts to change. And that's when we start to change. What we spoke about at the end of last week is this idea of daily rituals. Where do they come from? They come from issues. was talking to you last week about a coach named Paul Brown, who was one of the great inventors of all the different small nuances that make up today modern day football. And it all came from him wanting to win so badly that he would look at the game and say, well, how can I make this better? And how can I make this better? And how can I make this better? He had this goal in mind of a Super Bowl, or back then it was a championship. And he looked at the players and how can I relate to the quarterback better? What if I put a transistor radio in his helmet 4 decades before that became what people did? How do I review film? How do I review game film so that I can study? All these are ways that people look and go, I want to go here. Well, how do I make what I'm in front of better? And where we left off last week was, this isn't rocket science. I don't want us to feel overwhelmed by the challenge of change. It's not overwhelming. It's simple. It's just difficult. It just requires discipline. It's consistency that makes people change. It's not some dynamic growth moment. One doesn't have to go from like, I can barely walk, to when does the marathon start? That's not real growth. It's just a discipline to be consistent, to be consistent, to be consistent. This was memorialized in a great, it's called a medrash. Medrash, I guess, is a tradition that during the old days, one of the study sessions, there was a controversy that broke out as to what was the most important verse in the entire Bible, entire Torah. And there was all the rabbis would try to compete to see who got it. And then everybody was like, I guess, voting. And one rabbi said the most important verse is the Shema. It's a pretty big verse, right? People die with that on their lips. It's the unification of God's name. And one rabbi got up and said, no, that's not it. It's the V'ahavta l'recha kamocha. It's when you love your neighbor like yourself. I mean, what's better than that? That's the bond of love that we have for each other. And everyone's like, whoa, that's a good one. And one rabbi got up and said, there was this rule that every morning they had to bring a sacrifice in the morning and a sacrifice in the afternoon. And that's the verse said, every morning you bring one in the morning, every morning you bring one in the end. And I was looking like, what? That's it? Sacrifices? The first person said the Shema. The second person said, love thy neighbor. And you said you came up with sacrifices, and they voted. This is what the Medrash says. They voted. And the winner was the sacrifice line. Because if you do something every morning and every afternoon, that's how you make your life different. That's how you change your life. You could have moments of where you look up and you see God clearly, and you could have moments where you feel connected to each other, and those are important. But those come and go. You got to condition them every day, every day, every day. That's the challenge of our lives. That's what we got to work on. And so where we left off was this idea called deliberate practice. Now, how does this work? Okay, so now that we've been doing this together for a bit, we all understand a little bit of how our mind works. That every time you have a consistent thought, it builds connections. So if I have the same or very similar consistent thoughts again and again and again, if I have a consistent string of thoughts again and again and again, my brain will on its own build the right pieces so that it's structured in. I not only can understand how to look at a cup and say cup, and I do a lot more than that. I also know that when I wake up in the morning and I see a yellow box, not only do I know, let's just think about how much the brain had to do for this. To eat breakfast in the morning, the brain had to not only learn the word called Cheerios, had to also, in a split second, get you to know how to open it, pour it, what food goes with it, milk, how to take an object and then get it into your mouth without thinking about it. So it had to marry knowledge, taste buds, and then activity, hand-eye coordination, which seems like nothing for us. But as a child, it took forever. Like the 2-year-old's like pointing at the box going Cheetos. When it gets on his tray, it's all over the place, right? Like to get all of that down takes practice again and again and again and again until finally you get to come into your kitchen when you're an adult and you don't even use an ounce of brain power. to pull the cereal out of the cabinet, to pour in the milk, to eat while you're talking, doing something. Your brain you never miss your mouth. You're not sitting around being like looking at your phone and like you're missing your mouth when you're 21 years old. How come you can't miss your mouth? Because the brain created the structure. There's this great concept that the psychologists or scientists found, that once your brain creates a string of activities, it surrounds those brain sort of connections with something called, if I remember, myelin. Andy's, I'm sure, looking it up as we speak. Myelin is this coating that your brain has that it puts over these string of activities. So it's almost like as if like it's like imagine like the coating of like a plug into a wall. Like when you plug in your iPhone, the white thing is like a coating that makes sure that all the wires stay together. So your brain is so incredible that when you string certain activities together, it creates like a coating around it, so that when you start one, it automatically goes to the other. It's insane. We have the most insane, awesome myelin. Andy, you rock. If you're on chats with us in the morning, if you're here live, you not only get to hear this, but you get to get Andy finding everything that I'm saying in split seconds. So what that means, though, is that as we look at our lives, much of our lives is just us rejiggering the computer. So when I do something every day, if I do it consistently every day, what I'm doing is I'm building a really strong connection. And if I do it with other things, I'm actually building a pretty strong set of behaviors. So if you think about it, we can design a part of our lives where there's a standard of excellence to behaviors that bring us to our visions. Like, it's insane. You think about it. You have a vision of what you want. So it's opposed to jumping for it and trying to use more willpower than you have. Why don't we instead build habits, very small +1 habits that start to connect dots, so that over time we have a string of behaviors that just have us live in the place where we want to be? How do we do that? So this concept called the 10,000 hour rule is that when you do things again and again and again and again, it gets stronger and stronger and stronger, and then ultimately you're a world-class expert at it. Stop being so impressed by the violinist that's playing at the concert. What you should be impressed with is that he or she, they weren't born geniuses of violins. They just worked so hard. They probably had a proclivity towards it. They probably had a personality towards it. They probably had something that led them towards that versus something else. Okay. They may have stood out. They may have some natural talents. They may have some, I believe, some spiritual. Great. But that doesn't make you an expert. What makes you an expert is the work. And if you watch enough behind the scenes anything, you see that. Why Tom Brady's the best quarterback is, he had things that other people don't have. But he wasn't picked 199th and became a Hall of Famer because he sat back and just figured it out along the way. I watched this documentary last night's run. The post-Sabbath run was to a mini doc on a man named Chris Collinsworth, who was a broadcaster for Sunday Night Football. They say he's the hardest working guy around. Of course he is. That's how you become great. Of course he had a talent to something. But talent doesn't get you that far. It's the deliberate work that gets you so far. So how does this work? So Anders Ericsson says 10,000 hours isn't enough. In fact, 10,000 hours, or whatever the 1,000 hours are, by the way, it's not even 10,000. You start to develop something way before that. Way before that. But Anders said something so interesting. He said, it's not enough to do something. You have to do it through a concept called deliberate practice. What is deliberate practice? So I want to give you two different perspectives in life. And if you really get underneath this, if we do this week, it'll blow us up, in my opinion. When that little kid comes down and he sits at his table and his siblings are all eating and he wants those Cheerios, whatever age he is, and he points at the box and he goes, Cheeos. What happened in his brain? Just for a few seconds we have today, right? So in his mind, he's hearing the ch sound and the r sound and the s sound. So his brain, without him realizing it, is creating connections between that yellow box and some cha and some ra and some and it's just like all these little connections are forming in his little brain. There's a cha there. You almost can imagine like little ropes or little like strings coming together towards one box. There's chi-ri-o. That's a big word for a little kid. So he goes, chios. He can't get the whole word down. He says chios. So in his brain, theoretically, there's these connections between the cha and the ra and that yellow box. And when he says chios or chiros, the crowd's not like Cheeros. What are you, a moron? Cheeros? What the heck is Cheeros? Like mom's not like learning to turn into like her 1-year-old, be like, Cheeos? That's what you got? Cheeos? I gotta call your father. I gotta call the school. We're gonna talk later. Cheeos? Really? That's what you got? Cheeos? You've been living in this house for a year? You're looking at that box every single day for a year, and all you can come up with is Cheeos? This is ridiculous. Why me? No, mom's not doing that. You know what mom's doing? Oh my gosh, Cheeos. Hold on, say it again. We're going to show grandma. We're showing Bobby. What are you kidding me? Say that again. Cheeos. And everyone's like, Cheeos, Cheeos. The kid feels like $1 million he got in Cheeos. You ever watch a little kid sing the song wrong in the car? You think you can't stop. You almost pull over the kid to get a kiss. Because when little people are little, they're cute. Everything little is cute. A suit jacket that's little is cute. Shoes that are little is cute. Take anything in the world and make it little, it becomes cute. So the kid's cute. So you know what the kid gets? All this positive feedback. Oh, I am the best. I said Cheeos. You know what he wants? He leans in to figure out how to do it again, and he realizes that it's chi. There's a ra there. And in his little brain, mommy says to him, it's Cheerios. And he goes, Cheerios. And then he goes a little bit longer, and he goes, Cheerios. Mommy goes, Cheerios. What mommy's doing to that little kid is she's just engaging what's called deliberate practice. See, the brain doesn't, you don't have like a brain that says Cheerios waiting somewhere in a box. It doesn't work that way. You're just firing your neurons. Neurons don't fire in completion. Neurons fire in pieces. The way everything works is you just get a little bit of it. And then you round out a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. So you hear Cheeros and you're excited to learn again. Little kids are excited to learn. They don't know better. They don't have that ego. They don't have to have it done by now. They're not on the treadmill of life. No one looks at them and goes, you don't know Cheeros by 8 months old? Like, really? We got to put you in like remedial, like growing up. You got to eat in like the living room now. And as they hear, they learn how to round out that one thing. They're practicing. Their life is just practice, and practice means I'm rounding out my neuroplasticity. I did a habit, and then I look for feedback, and then I say, well, how do I make that habit a little bit better? What do I add to that habit? What do I take away from that ritual? Did I do that early enough, late enough? Did it have the impact? There's an excitement towards figuring it out versus, am I there yet? That's the difference between an adult and a child many times. An adult has an idea and it's like, am I here yet? The kid can take forever. Because a kid is lined up with his mind. And an adult is lined up with our society. And many times society is not very much in favor of our growth. We'll talk a lot about this week. For those that are joining us, hope you have a great Sunday. Thanks for tuning in on a Sunday. It really means a lot to me. I'm going to talk about how to make our rituals, how to use deliberate practice in our lives. Once we start realizing that we are practicing, life is practice. If we can just let that ego go and just realize that I'm practicing. I could be 95 and I'm still practice. Once that happens, we practice very different and we grow very differently. All right, looking forward to it. Have an awesome, awesome day. And with God's help, I'm looking forward to speaking to you this week and then tomorrow morning. Thanks so much for tuning in.